Hello, and welcome to another edition of IIDA Georgia Speaks virtually. I am Ronnie Belizaire, a corporate real estate manager for Daimler and a current vice president on the International Board of Directors for IIDA, and I'll be serving as your moderator for today's discussion. We'd like to take a moment to thank all of our chapter patrons for their generous support in making all of our programming possible. Thank you. We organized this panel a few weeks ago to give voice to a diverse group of designers in an attempt to discuss inclusivity within our design industry. The killing of George Floyd 3 months ago at the hands of police officers sparked a flame that has since unraveled the consciousness of American society and led to ongoing discussions regarding racial inequality and social injustice. We would be remiss if we did not acknowledge the ongoing plight of Black people at the hands of law enforcement with the recent shooting of Jacob Blake, an unarmed Black man who was shot 7 times in the back with his children in plain sight this past Sunday by Kenosha, Wisconsin police officers. While Mr. Blake survived the shooting, we will never understand why this keeps happening in our America, and we stand with those who work tirelessly to eradicate systemic racism. It's not an easy transition to make, but now I'd like to take an opportunity to introduce our panelists. First, we have Ian Hunter, who's an associate principal with TVS Design. We've got Cheyenne Kalilamati, who is design director for environments at Big Red Rooster. Cam Robinson, who's an associate with ASD Sky. And last but certainly not least, Renita Woodson, who's an interior designer and founder of Renita Falana Designs. Thank you all for taking the opportunity to share your points of view on how we can make Georgia more inclusive. I'd like to start by asking, how did you all get interested in design and what was your introduction into the industry? Ian, do you want to answer that first?
Sure. So I first got introduced to design in high school by my high school college counselor, my counselor at school, and I grew up in Katy, Texas, and walked into the room and he asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I told him I wanted to be a mechanical engineer. Just seemed like it sounded like a good job. It's where I wanted to be. And I don't want to say he totally judged a book by its cover, but he was like, let's take a deeper dive into your math and science grades, candidly. And he was like, I don't think you want to be a mechanical engineer. So he asked me what I had liked, and I spent a lot of time pursuing art and music, and I was decently good at math and science, and he pushed me to go take a summer program for design at Cornell, and I loved it. It was the most fun I ever had in school, and I actually made good grades doing it. And so I just knew it was the right thing for me. That's what got me my introduction into design.
Nice. It's kind of amazing how we never quite end up where we think we're going to be when we first get into school. Thank you for sharing. Renita, how did you get introduced to design?
My introduction to design, I guess my introduction to design would probably be from my mother, who has a master's degree in home economics, but she taught pattern making, construction for fashion design at a college in Huntsville, Alabama A&M. So that was probably my introduction, just being around my mother, learning to sew and things like that. But as far as interior design, my introduction to interior design was from I guess formal introduction was I was working as a test engineer for Boeing. This is my second career. But Boeing at the time would pay for you to go to any certified program, any type. It didn't have to relate to your current job. If it was a credit institution, they would pay for your school. So I found an interior design certificate program at the University of Alabama in Huntsville, and that was my first formal introduction to interior design. And I took those classes while working for Boeing, and I realized it was something that I wanted to pursue, later. And I then left IT after a couple of years and then went go to school, design school full time.
Okay. Did you ever think about designing planes for Boeing?
After I got into interior design, I was like, maybe I should do some planes. Maybe that would be very cool. But by that time, my connection with Boeing, and I dealt with missiles and other things, so I didn't deal with the planes and jets and things like that. So I thought about it later, but I just never really took a deep dive into trying to figure out how to get into that airplane design.
Very cool. Pam, how did you get introduced to design? Seems like we have a little bit of a delay with Pam. So Shai, would you mind sharing how you got involved with design?
Sure. Hey, everyone. So how I got into design. Since I was a kid, I've always loved getting my hands dirty, and I had a lot of craft-like hobbies, such as making jewelry, to making purses out of old school uniforms. That was kind of a weird phase. But my grandfather was an artist, and growing up, he would always let me imagine anything I wanted in his art studio. So from there on, from an early age, I started painting, and I do now large-scale abstract pieces on the side. It's been probably like one every 2 to 3 years, but with the style of art that I do, I really focus on building those layers and adding a lot of textures to my pieces. And in similar ways, that's how I approach designing spaces. So what drove me into the field of where I'm at today is, being a Florida native, the first time I walked into Disney World, I automatically felt like I was walking into all those childhood stories my mom would read me. And all those times together as a kid are some of my most fondest memories. And I told myself that I want to be able to design experiences and memories for folks to hold on to like that.
Yeah. That's amazing that that's your experience with Disney, is wanting to create spaces for people. Mine was run away, get me out of here. This is overwhelming. So interesting how, depending on the kid, what their experience might feel like. Pam, how did you get introduced to design?
Well, as a child, I lived 2 blocks away from the Toledo Art Museum. I took art classes there, and I spent most of my summer there taking classes and just going to visit the museum. But it never dawned on me to do something in the arts or creative like that as a way of living. I got out of high school and decided that I liked math and science, and I didn't want to be a teacher or a librarian or a doctor. So I said I'd go into business. So I went to the University of Cincinnati, and I graduated with a degree in business. I left there and went to work for IBM. While I was working for IBM, I became their facilities manager and started working with contractors and interior designers on spaces that we were building out. And I thought the particular interior designer that I was working with, I just thought she was the coolest. And I said, I want to do this. So I went back to school, right, like Juanita, this is my second career, went back to school and got a degree in interior design at Kent State. Joined ASD, and here I am.
Wow. Once again, everything you think you're going to be when you grow up, and then all of a sudden you find yourself doing something that's completely separate and apart from that. Thank you all for sharing your journeys into design. I'm going to shift the dialogue just a little bit here, and we'll start to go into more of our topic at hand, which is social justice and inclusivity. What impact has the country's current social justice climate had on your personal and or professional life? Shai, would you take that one first?
Sure. For those who don't know, I'm actually mixed race, and I'm also first generation American. I grew up with 2 very different cultures in a household where English was not my parents' first language. My father's Middle Eastern and my mom is Hispanic. There was quite a bit of struggles that I faced, and still time to time I still do. But with the country's current climate, it has me reflecting a lot and figuring out what else could I do to help make a difference for all those times that I felt quiet or I felt uncomfortable to say something. I think, if there's anything that 2020 has really taught me is the power of your voice and knowing how to use it.
Thanks for sharing that. I would tend to agree with you that all of a sudden, this current climate literally has me in reflective mode, and I think it's got a lot of people in reflective mode. So it's interesting how we thought we knew how we felt about certain things, or we thought we managed them, and now all of a sudden our worlds are upended trying to navigate what we do next. So thank you for sharing that. Renita, what about you? Oh, I think we're having technical difficulties with Renita here. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you now. Perfect.
All right. Our country's current, I guess, social climate has affected me, I guess, personally and professionally. Professionally, well, let's start with personally. It is just one of, this has been, I mean, certain injustices or feelings, as you said, Ronnie, you just kind of learn to live with. So now in this time of social, I guess, justice unrest on top of the pandemic, when you are, stationary, much more stationary than we typically are. And for me personally, I have a 14-month-old, so that was already a new thing on top of that was going on for me personally before these things happened, which probably put me in reflective mode overdrive. Like, what do I want to come out of this? What do I want the outcome of this situation to be? And now that I am still and have this new person to be concerned about, as well as a business, what does that mean for me personally? So it has definitely brought about reflection, but it has also brought about a feeling of hope, that things will actually, something has been started or set on fire, a flame has started that will hopefully be a fire and not get sniffed out, and not people get weary, or you get tired, or when the country opens back up, even though I think that's a while, but it's another discussion, that we are not tired of this conversation, that we have used this time of reflection well to plan and organize so that when we all open back up, we can hit the ground running for change. So it has ignited hope, or reignited hope, as well as during the time of reflection. So that's for me, that's what it's done for me.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up the idea of the pandemic somewhat creating this space where we all have no choice but to sit here and also reflect. So thank you for sharing your point of view on that. Ian, what about yourself?
Yeah, so this has been definitely a time. I'm sorry, my dog is barking in the background. So it's been definitely a, hold on one quick second. Okay. This has been a time for me to, can you actually go to Pam and come back to me? There's a lot going on right now.
Sure, no problem. Pam, how has this current climate affected you?
Well, I think it actually has sort of allowed me to feel comfortable about talking about issues. For so long, I have been the only Black in the room, especially when you're talking about interior design and construction and working on projects and that world. And so I just kind of did my job and tried to stay out of the way and didn't make a fuss, because that's how I was raised, basically. But actually, the current situation and everyone talking about it has allowed me almost to be able to take a breath and say, oh, okay, so I can talk about this now, and it's okay. And I'm very encouraged by the amount of communication and conversations that we are having about it. I mean, things like this program that you're doing here, My company really has embraced it, and we have groups that talk about the issues on a weekly basis. And I think the country is just in a better place just because it's comfortable to talk about it, and it's okay to talk about it, and it's a common topic these days. So I think it's a great thing all in all.
No, you make a really good point. I think more specifically for myself and maybe other, Black individuals have experienced this also. We learned to compartmentalize, right, our lives. And so whatever we felt in the personal, we kind of made sure there was no way that seeped into what you were doing in the professional world. And we just learned to maintain. And now all of this has been brought to light. We are vocal, we can share without fear of being seen or viewed in a certain way. So I totally agree with you when it comes to that's one good thing that's come out of this. Ian, now that your dog's a little bit more quiet, how are you dealing with the current social climate?
So it's put me in a new position that just new waters to navigate. And so I'm a gay man. I'm part of the LGBTQ community, and social justice and has been a very important part of my life for a very long time. And I have often thought about social justice causes with me as a minority who I'm trying to fight for my own rights. And now the discourse has shifted my position. I'm not a person of color. And that means that unlike my normal experiences, when I think about as being a minority, and I'm calling upon my friends, the straight community, to use their privilege and the power of their voice to stand and fight for my rights, and thinking about how strong those voices of privilege are, I now realize that that's the position that I'm in. Those tables have turned for me. And, it has yielded some challenging and educating conversations for me with my friends, colleagues who are all people of color. And really what I've realized is that I need to listen and ask questions to best understand how I can be supportive to my fellow minority communities. Because one of the things that we realize whenever any minority is persecuted is that when we all band together, whether you're a woman, a person of color, part of the LGBTQ community, is when we all band together, we go from being a minority to being the majority. And with that congregation of voices, we become really powerful.
Yeah, I'm glad that this time has allowed you to start to shift your focus into ally mode, right? It's interesting that you could take your struggles or your challenges that you face as a gay man to now start to see and empathize with person of color and what their struggles may or may not be in the world. So kudos to you for doing the hard work of actually taking that reflection and looking in on yourself. Renita, do you feel that design plays a role in responding to social justice causes? And if so, how can we support social fairness through design?
Hello?
Yep, we can hear you.
I just, I've been having technical difficulties. So I do believe that design plays a role in social justice and equity. A lot of times, I think when when you first ask the question, my mind goes directly to public spaces and how do we design public spaces to be inclusive and of all, and to make everyone feel welcome. But even when thinking about that design, as far as affordable housing, things like that, like design to me does directly affect, to me, equity and inclusivity. When people can feel that their environment wherever they are, from home to public spaces, have been done in such a way that I am not any different from anyone else. I may live in a different location, but I have been thought about. I have been considered because someone actually designed this for me, not an afterthought, not a what's left, a happen. It happened to be like this, but someone actually, there was some intent. To me, that's what design is. It's you're tackling a problem with intent to come up with a solution that solves whatever problem you are approaching. So I definitely think design has a role in equity and inclusivity in that way. I mean, that's just to me a start, or at least my initial thought.
Now, you make a really good point, intentional planning in order to help the least of these be able to navigate a world that looks like something that's exciting and aspiring for them. So good points there. Pam, what are your thoughts on the role design plays in social justice causes?
Well, this is a big world. And as I indicated earlier, I didn't feel as a child like doing something creative or doing something that affected my environment was something that I could do as a profession. Never even crossed my mind. And I think that often, when I moved to Atlanta, I was very, very, very disappointed at the low amount of Blacks in the design industry here in Atlanta, only because Atlanta at the time was supposed to be the place to be for Black folks. And I still see that. And I think a lot of that is because it's never proposed as an option for children when they're when they're going through career fairs or they don't have parents who are involved in the industry. And I just think that a lot of that is education, and that children need to be exposed to that career and the opportunity to design at a much younger age, not at college level, at elementary school level, so that they understand that that opportunity is out there for them, and thus we would have more people of color involved in the and just make changes from the ground up.
Yeah, I mean, obviously education's key, right? If people are exposed to it, then they know to look for it as something that they potentially could do. And then the more diverse points of view that you have in the design process, then all of a sudden, all of these various subgroups of society could then start to be represented within the design process. So very good points there. Ian, I'll pivot just a little bit. It's still within the same topic, but oftentimes design is seen as a luxury to the general public, right? It's seen as something, it's aspirational, you can't attain it, it's for rich people, right? But how can we make design more accessible to the masses and design spaces that foster a culture of inclusion?
I think that I have two answers to that question. The first is it comes down to education, and I think this ties in a little bit to what Pam was just talking about educating people that design is a viable career path for people at a very young age. And these are career paths that we see in low income communities around the nation. It's not a discussion that people are having. But on top of that, we don't have discussions in those communities and with children at an elementary school, junior high, high school level about what design is. There is a misconception that design has to be expensive, that design has to be new, and that design is not for everybody. And as we all know, that's just not true. Design takes so many different faces. And to me, a lot of it is like what Renita was saying, it all comes down to intentionality. And you can make some really small but really powerful moves in the world of design without a lot of money and really change people's lives. But it's about approaching design problems and partnering with the people you work for, the developers, the clients that we work for, and educating them that intentionality is important. If you're working on a multifamily project and you have a low income portion of the project, like Renita said, that doesn't become the leftovers. It's not that you paid less design attention to it. How do you approach the problem and make that part of the project affordable, high quality, and intentional? So I think that's actually, I think I gave you both parts of that answer, is that it's education, but it's also the intentionality behind design. And it really comes down to being able to educate your clients and push them to do the right thing when it comes to design solutions.
Once again, the points about intentionality are obviously, supreme here, because if we don't go in with a certain intent, our problem solving is completely skewed because we're only focused on one area. And half the time when we're working for clients, we're focused on their bottom line and getting the job done quickly versus really thinking about how we do this the best way. Shai, what are your thoughts on how we can make design more accessible?
So, I really want to break this stereotype that about design is a luxury, because more than half the time we don't get even luxurious budgets. So I kind of want to take this question from a brand experience lens. And, I really love what Dashboard has been doing with all of these pop-up art installation outdoors. Everything's very highly interactive and super low budget, but it makes the most impact. For that 1 second, you really feel connected and you feel a part of that installation. And there's something about creating a theme with limited resources. And I feel like in the end, those results are far more superior than a high budget project. Another example of an installation like that is those Before I Die walls all around the world. When you think about it, what are the mediums? It's just paint and chalk. But it gives that opportunity for someone to leave their imprint. It really shows people that how I'm feeling, I'm not alone. And, if you have any goals and aspirations, like putting yourself out there, having your voice heard, I think that's what we need to start thinking about. Like, how can we start doing those little installations, the little design moves all across your community? And I just feel like we should see more of that.
Yeah, experiential design, right? It's not just about putting some walls up or building up or creating a pocket park. It's about what is that experience that that person is going through. And I'm going to go back to my healthcare design days for a second. I started my career as a healthcare designer, and I remember, when you're designing hospitals, you're right there seeing people's lives get saved. You're seeing people have babies. You're seeing all these are the spaces you're creating. And I have a saying that I like to say, while design, we may not be saving lives, but we're creating the spaces in which those lives are saved, in which those lives are lived, in which those lives are experienced, in which those lives come into the world that we live in. So I love that point about experiential design, Shai. So good job. Pam, what opportunities do you think exist with growing inclusivity within the design industry? You tapped into the need to educate, but how do we go beyond just saying we're going to expose children at a younger age?
Well, I think that this sort of just having the conversations and being comfortable having the conversations helps to broaden the knowledge about design, about the need for design, about the understanding that everything is designed. It's just designed well or it's designed poorly. And just having people be aware that it doesn't take a whole lot more time or effort to design it well. And getting a variety of attitudes and personalities and socioeconomic type people involved in it only makes it easier and more adaptable to anybody who would need to use it.
No, really good point there. I always say bad design costs just as much as good design does. So why not do it the right way the first time? Ian, what are your thoughts on how we can grow a more inclusive design industry?
To me, this is such an interesting question because when you talk about what are the opportunities from growing inclusivity in our industry, I almost think about it from a business perspective and why inclusive business is good business. We talk a lot about race and diversity and inclusion in our businesses. And a lot of that is because we want to do the right thing, and that's great, right? We love to do the right thing and we love to be good people and be inclusive, but there's a really strong case to be made for the fact that having diverse and inclusive businesses is literally good for your business. And in the design industry, to me, that means, we have so many clients that they want to have a diverse group of end users in their space, whether it's a market or a restaurant, a gathering place, a business. And with that, you need to be able to design spaces that are inclusive. And because as designers, we draw so strongly on our personal experience through our lives in the way in which we design space, our solutions are all tailored to the experiences that we've had throughout our lives. And so when I think about our team, for example, in our office at TVS, creating a space that says, okay, this is going to be a great space, it's going to be inclusive, we are going to make sure that it is addressing the voices of, for example, people of color in the space, and making sure that people of color feel this is an inviting, inclusive space. Well, I am not the person to weigh in on that part of the design because that's not my experience. And when you have on your design team people of color or other racial minorities, gender minorities, all weighing in on the design and playing a very powerful part in the way you bring design to life, you will create inclusive spaces because you have that diversity of voices on your design team. And that makes your projects better. It makes your clients happier. So there's a strong case to be made for that.
No, you're spot on, right? Because everyone goes to the bottom line or the dollar first, and they're not thinking, hello, if I do this in the work that I produce, then ultimately it's going to attract a diverse space that then attracts them to spending their dollars with our organization. So really good points made there. Renita, what are your thoughts on how we can grow inclusivity within design?
My thoughts as it relates to growing inclusivity within design, I tend to, again, as Ian pointed out, you weigh on your experiences. So my experience and introduction and my path to design was one in which, you can look at different stops or along the way. But I also, as I mentioned, I worked in IT. So I have a BS in computer science from Spelman College. I went to Spelman College on a scholarship because I performed really well in math and science, and NASA sponsored a scholarship for me to go to Spelman to study and become, I guess, whatever I want to be, an engineer, a scientist of some kind. But I was a, minority who excelled in math and sciences, and they said, hey, you can do this, go do it. Great. I want to go to Atlanta. I want to go to Spelman. Y'all are paying for it. Sure. I'm sold. Let me go and, explore things that I think I'm interested in. Now, my interest into design was totally different. I worked, and then I decided after their certificate program that I'm going to change careers. And it was one from a much more higher paying career to go back to school and to take on debt and to ultimately end up in a career that I felt passionate about, but I also knew would pay me less money. So when trying to attract, to me, a more diverse base, I think you can't skip over the discussion and the influence of economics when you discuss this, because to me, you kind of miss it's a real reality. Do I pick a career in something I'm passionate about, or do I pick a career that I know I can take care of myself and my family in a way that I strive to take care of, whether that's what I'm accustomed to, the lifestyle I'm accustomed to from my parents, or it's something that I just know, hey, this is a more sure end of I can take care of myself. So to me, economics is a way of, kind of putting, I don't want to say your money where your mouth is, but for lack of a better term, thinking about ways or finding ways to not only with exposure, but put funds behind it to say, and I'm not saying just give out as a free for all, but deserving, people have been educated, exposed, and showed interest in this, but it's a real decision between, do I go into something else or do I go into design that is a career that I'm passionate and I'm actually very good at, but I have economic assistance to get me through those, wonderful programs at various institutions across the country, and that I can come out and pursue this career in design. And that, to me, that then leads to more diverse teams. If you have more diversity in your, firms and design groups, and again, exposure. This is it's a wide array of ways you can be involved in design industry, but thinking about those things and actually saying, how are we, again, intentional about trying to increase diversity in our firms, in our industry. And this is really not an industry, you get at, to me, I know I needed to go to school. I didn't feel okay about, let me just figure out how to get over here. And some people do, but I'm saying if you're thinking about school with even scholarships or things like that, but I think dealing with or starting having discussions about how can we help with money so that we can increase, diversity in our firms or in the interest groups that would then form into our pipeline for the industry.
Really good point there. That intentional giving that then helps to fund someone going to get this education. To your point, economics makes a big deal. No one really talks about how expensive it is to get a design education, whether you go to a public institution or private institution. It is one of the most expensive degrees to go after. And if your family is not in a position to support that, forget just what regular school costs, but then it's all the supplies that are associated with the programs. No one told me markers are going to be $4 a piece when I got to design school. And that was 15 years ago, 16 years ago. So how do we start to create or bridge that gap of financial expenses? Because to your point, Renita, you don't come into this industry expecting to make a whole lot of money, but yet your education cost way more than you could stomach to then say, I'm going to carry this debt knowing that I'm not going to make that much money. So very good points there. Shai, what are your thoughts? Oh, I think you're on mute, Shai.
Sorry, you guys. I'm kind of going to follow in that same suit. I think to me, it's really finding that bravery of all those ideas that you kind of fill up in your head. And you should just do what you want to do. I'm going to share a little story. I won't say any names. It may have been someone I had previously dated a long, long time ago. But, I was really nervous about getting into this field and studying architecture back in school. And this was, about 14 years ago. And I was told for a few reasons that I couldn't do it. And one of them was, it was because I was a female. And I don't know what was in me, but I just felt so empowered. It was like an overnight switch where I just had this realization that I was just like, who's dictating my life? It's like I should be able to do what I want to do. And I really hope folks like feel that same way. I think there's so much opportunity where we can just all empower each other and listen to each other. And I really want to see some continuation of different activities that, we can all get involved in. A few years ago, I did an exercise with middle schoolers and high schoolers that are part of the Boys and Girls Club, where I showed them how to create an identity for their own personal brand. And that was probably the most fun I've had in a long time. And I saw all these kids with huge smiles on their face, and they were just so focused, really taking this exercise very seriously, trying to think about who they are and how they want to be seen. And those type of exercises where you push people to take the time and reflect on who they want to become and what their like is, what's their interest, is so important. And I want to be able to participate in more workshops like that, because in the end, I think it helps us all feel better.
Yeah, I mean, workshops are a tremendous way of not necessarily spending a lot of money as an organization, but you put a program out there and you use your staff to be able to be the resources, the human capital that then puts this program on for younger kids. And it's amazing how much, number one, the morale that it builds for your organization and the employees within your organization, but also the exposure it gives to kids who might not otherwise ever know that. This spills in, and most of these questions somewhat tie to one another, no matter how we dice them, but this spills into this idea of the, diverse pipeline. And how does that pipeline start to literally reflect what we want it to be, which is more inclusive, right? So Pam, I know you brought the topic of education up. So when we say education, what do you really mean by that? Is it truly just going into a school and starting a program within a school, or what are your thoughts on what do you mean by education?
I guess I mean it's all of that. It's the career fairs. It's the mentorship. It's the take a kid to school, take your kid to work day. It's the programs that show, especially kids from disadvantaged areas, programs that show them a different way of life, something different than what they're used to seeing every day. Be it, their mom's, a teacher, or their mom's a maid, or their dad's a janitor. There are other things. And I think that the more we expose children to not just design, but other avenues outside of what they see every day, the better off they are. It will also help them to be more, to think outside the box, and to be a little more inclusive and willing to cope with others and in their environments, and help to understand other people's environments. The more we can put into their little brains things that they never thought of or have never seen, the better off they will be.
Very good points there. Ian, when you think of a pipeline for a firm, right? You're an associate principal at a firm. What do you guys do to recruit? How do you recruit? Where do you recruit from?
Yeah, this ties in a lot to what Pam was talking about. And on a personal level, I think it's really important for us to, at a very early age, think about how we are sending the message about what we do in our industry, and that this is a very viable, rewarding line of work. That is a line of work. I think a lot of people just don't realize it. On a professional level, when we talk about, for example, how we think about driving diversity in the pipeline And admittedly, there are gaps in the pipeline when it comes to representation of Black people in the design industry. You can go to any awards ceremony that we have all year round. It's not a super diverse looking crowd. And so we have to think intentionally, and I know that is a key word for us today, about how we approach that. And this is something that I have felt really passionate about, and I know our team does in our office, is really thinking about when you are hiring, that it becomes strategic and intentional. And if you think that you can sit back and let your inbox pile full of resumes, and that you're just going to go to your inbox and find a fantastically diverse set of things that just showed up on your doorstep one morning, you're mistaken. We do have gaps in the pipeline, but we can be proactive and we can go out and try. So for example, we partner with historically Black colleges in the Southeast region, and we take our firm to those career fairs and we engage with those schools to make sure that we can recruit from them. And even something as simple as that move has helped us and made it easy for us to show a more diverse face in our company. And there's no mistake that I don't think our firm, or probably any firm in Atlanta that's the size of a company like TVS, it has met anywhere near the goal of what we're trying to achieve, because the next step is not just showing a diverse set of faces in your firm, but it's also getting them in the door and pushing them into leadership positions. And I think that's something that we need to make sure we don't lose sight of. That you need to see those diverse faces need to be at your entry level positions all the way to your level 1 positions at your firm.
You bring up a really good point, Ian, that I did want to touch on. Specifically in Metro Atlanta, it isn't, you'll find, designers of color. It's not an issue to find them, right? Specifically in this city. But the challenge is they stay at the staff level, right? To your point, they're not climbing up that ladder of the organization. Because when you start to look at what the principalship of firms are, or who is leading those firms, who are directors at those firms, that's when you start to notice all of a sudden it doesn't look like this diverse space or place. And if the people making decisions at the firms aren't diverse, then how, we're losing a battle, because we're never going to get to certain things because the people that are higher up aren't a diverse space. So very good point that you bring up there. Renita, any thoughts on diversifying the pipeline?
No, I think my thoughts with diversifying. I mean, Ian makes a great point, especially for larger firms that have those resources. And I guess I can speak from a small business owner. I am very intentional, and that's again based on my personal experiences, that I go out and look for when I need consultants on a project, or I need contractors, or and when I say contractors, design contract work, that I go out and literally seek people of color first. And as a small business owner, I feel like, I know it's not, I'm not a big giant, but I feel like if I am able to hire regularly one other person, then that's something, at least to give them, opportunity to design, because a lot of people are, with me being a smaller firm, a lot of contractors I have used are surprised at the quality level, or the types of project scopes and things that I have been able to, attain or win those projects. So I think, opening your mind to be able to work with different people and understand the value that those differences bring to all of us. So it's not just for the, you know, the person who is getting the job or in the pipeline or sending the resume. It also makes you better as individuals and as to me, a collective group, company, firm, whatever it is, therefore making us all collectively as a community better. If all of us think alike, what do you have there? If we all are on the same, we agree with everything, we have the same experiences, what richness do we have? I think your richness comes in the diversity. So I think again, as Ian said, I think intentional is definitely our word, where it's not just going to fall from the sky onto your computer or into your meeting, like, oh, somebody just sent a mystery invite and now this person is now on my team. No, it's some work required of those who are in those decision-making positions. It's not on, it's not all on the people who are not being represented. It is some intentional work that you literally have to say, I am setting this time aside to actually look into this, or how can I go about trying to attack this problem just for my firm? I mean, if everybody started just with them, I think that would be quite an impact. You got to start somewhere. So that's what I would say.
Good point. And I think the small business owner perspective is very important in this, right? Because larger firms can partner with small businesses to do certain projects as well. That's another way to kind of diversify what it is that you all are doing and what your teams are made up of. So thank you, Renita, for that. I'm going to pivot a little bit back to mentorship in a way, or Shai, how do you personally advocate for more inclusion in design?
Sorry, I did it again. I am everyone's biggest cheerleader. I think, how can I personally advocate for more inclusion? It's really by listening, asking questions, and doing activities like this. I am not a huge fan of public speaking, never have. And, I just feel like topics like this is just so important to discuss. When it comes to like listening and asking questions, like a simple question to someone on your team who may look different, may have a different background, age, gender, etc. You know what? Just ask them how they're doing. How are you can go a long way, and I think that can help break down some molds so people can be comfortable to kind of explain their thought process and any ideas that they have. I always take the time to personally get to know my team, and whenever I recently switched careers and or not careers, just different jobs, and part of the criteria that I was looking for is really understanding a culture, seeing the culture of an office, and as well as seeing if they have diversity. And if they're lacking on that, then that's something I'm going to work my butt off to make sure that we really have that kind of group of folks represented well in the office. Because I think, as a designer, I want to continue to stretch my perspective. I want to continue to feel challenged. If I feel at a lull, then what am I really getting out of that? I think, being open-minded is something that I'm going to continue to advocate for. Oh, I think you're on mute, not Ronnie.
Thanks for that, Shai. Pam, what are your thoughts, and how do you personally advocate for inclusion in design?
Well, it's interesting because when I think about inclusion in design, I think about the occurrences where I've been involved in a design or involved in a project and the end user wasn't in the room. So you were designing based on someone's specifications, but not really knowing what the true requirements were because they weren't doing the job. So the counter could be too low or too high, and because they're not the one who's actually going to have to sit there. So I kind of look at it like that, in that the broader the broader the number of people that get asked the question or get asked to be brought to the table to be included in making those decisions, the better off. So it's really difficult for me unless we are able to tap into some of those resources, such as the historically Black colleges, or maybe even, some specialized programs that people already have at the schools and things like that, where we can kind of reach back and get some of those younger people, younger African Americans and people of color to be a part of the process, to be in the room, to be able to ask them the questions on their opinions of how this process should work.
You guys have given some interesting and very insightful perspectives on the topic at hand. We are slowly running out of time here, so I wanted to give each one of you an opportunity to say one last parting word on the topic, whether it's something that you think could be a next step for people individually or an organization, or just some inspirational words. Ian, let's start with you.
Sure. The thing that comes to my mind is that the expression, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And these conversations that we're having like this, the ones that we should all be having in our homes, in our workplaces, with leadership in our company that say, we want to see more diversity. We want to make sure we have a plan in place to make that happen. We want to make sure we get people of color in leadership roles in our firm. And that's what we want. And that in 2 months, that we don't stop talking about it. We will continue talking about it. You just continue to have these discussions and make that noise and never stop, and change will happen. So I think, to me, my thought is, and I think this is, Breonna Taylor is the #1 example of that. And I think our world is trying to do its best to be the squeaky wheel that's going to get the grease. And you just can't give up. And it's hard. But that's where we need to be. And we just never need to be quiet.
Thank you. Renita, any parting words from you?
First, I would like to say thank you for this opportunity and this space to at least start this conversation amongst us and those attending. I guess my parting words would be, I'm echoing in, and I'm also, the statement or the phrase behind me is really, I think, where we can all start there. As Ian said, change is never easy. It's usually never comfortable. And it requires work. And work, as we know it in this industry, we are not afraid of work because we are workers. In this industry, you work. And with that drive, I just think we need to be intentional about doing the work that is uncomfortable. And letting, to some extent, letting go of what you didn't do. You can't do anything about that. What you haven't done, you can only move forward. So my thing is to start with yourself. What can I personally do in my sphere of influence? And of course, for everyone, that's different. We have some entry level and we have some up to, CEOs. So it's a different sphere of influence, but just be that change and actually start being intentional about those conversations and, forming teams and partnerships or even mentorships within your company, as well as even with other, to your point, Ron, other businesses. Because sometimes you may not bring that person in, but it's a mentorship and a relationship that it's not always about what you can get from that person, because you get things that are not always that direct, what you're focusing on that moment. That relationship can bring a lot of other things to you. So I would just say, personally, each of us doing the work and literally just being the change that we want to see. Because if we don't start, then who will? That would be my point.
Good point. Thank you for that, Renita. Pam, parting words?
I guess to piggyback on Ian and Renita, again, we have to continue the conversations. It should be second nature to us to be inclusive. I don't want us to go back to the days when we had like affirmative action or quotas, or you counted how many this, that, and the other you had. It just, and I really think that is the more we talk about it, the more we share, the more we're honest with each other, it will just become second nature to be inclusive.
You will. Thank you, Pam. Shai.
I'll keep it short and sweet. These are words my mom has made me live by, and it's be kind. The act of kindness can take you far in life, and it could also make someone's day a bit better. I think if we continue to be kind with one another, despite everything that has happened in this past year and throughout all the years, I think it just shows how kindness can really be the change for the future. So.
Yeah. Thank you all so much for all those wonderful words. I'll end this by simply saying I'll reflect on my own experience within this Georgia chapter. I was fortunate enough to be the first person of color to take the presidency of this chapter back in 2013 and 2014. When I was asked to moderate this panel, I had a lot going on in my life, and my life has basically been upended over the past month. But when I heard what was being discussed and who the panelists were going to be, I said yes. Why? Because representation matters. And if I, 7 years removed from my presidency, can see how far this chapter has come along, and now we have a person of South Asian descent as the president in Naheed Raman, the Georgia chapter is doing an amazing job. So just keep doing that amazing job. I'm getting a little emotional because it's important to me. Representation matters, guys. So don't lose sight of all this fire and this energy that we all have to try to make this chapter the best that it can be. Just keep doing it. Keep doing the work. To Renita's point, we're all used to hard work. So keep doing that work. Thank you all again for joining us for this discussion. And we hope this is just a little insight on how we can make our chapter more inclusive. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.